The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. There's an interesting story that involves Bloomberg News and Donald Trump and Michael Bloomberg in the 2020 election, which is getting a lot of attention. But I actually think that it's something that is going on all the time, but maybe in a less noticeable way. And it's more just endemic to the system that we have and the relationships we have between media and centers of power and the political world. So what's going on? What's going on is that President Donald Trump's 2020 reelection campaign is revoking press credentials for employees, reporters of Bloomberg News. Now, why are they doing that? They're doing this because Bloomberg News has said they are not going to investigate Michael Bloomberg or other Democratic rivals during the primaries, but they will continue investigating Donald Trump. So is this a problem? Yes, it's a problem. I mean, if you call yourself a news reporting agency and you do investigations, it's a problem when you say, well, the person that is running for president who happens to own us is exempt from investigation, and everybody in that person's political party are exempt from investigation. It is a problem. But the thing is that I think that a lot of people are missing, Pat, is that this is just how the system we have works. Fox News also makes people immune from criticism. It also chooses not to report on stories for political reasons. It's more acute and cartoonishly problematic when it's, wow, Bloomberg, which has Michael Bloomberg's name, says they won't investigate Michael Bloomberg, but they'll investigate Trump, even though they're running against each other. Okay, yeah, I get that it's a problem, but the problem is actually way bigger than this.
And whenever Trump chooses to revoke press credentials or threatens to revoke press credentials, he always gets hit hard about it because it looks like he is coming down on the media, and we don't want to see that. We don't want to see a president try to stifle the media.
Right.
So typically we're against the president when he does that, when he gets mad at Jim Acosta and wants to take away his press credentials or CNN's press credentials in general. We know that that's wrong. This is the one particular instance where maybe it is acceptable for him to do so, because it's not fair for Bloomberg News to be critical of only Trump, whereas they're not going to be critical of Bloomberg or any of the other Democratic candidates. I'm not entirely sure where I fall on it, but I think it is legitimate this time, and the RNC does back Trump on this decision.
So here's my view. Media outlets ideally would be fair and independent, and if you do news reporting, nothing is off limits. So I agree that if this is a media outlet that says, well, we're going to be adversarial to Trump, but a priori, we are not going to be adversarial to Michael Bloomberg, I get the problem with that. But the thing is, every news outlet has these biases. None of these news outlets that are corporate are truly independent. So I just have a problem accepting that this is any worse. I get Trump's problem with it because he's going to be personally negatively affected by it. I just don't know that this is really worse than any of these other examples.
I guess the clearest contrast you could make too is maybe Fox News, because Fox News is typically in support of Trump.
Yeah.
They typically back the president, but they don't always, right? Because they're more loyal to the Republican Party and the establishment than they are to one particular person.
Sure.
So when they have to disagree with Trump, they will. Whereas Bloomberg, I mean, that media organization is run by Bloomberg himself. So it's not like they're primarily loyal to the establishment necessarily, or the Democratic Party. They're loyal to Michael Bloomberg. So I think that is the difference there. And I think that's why this is a different case.
Yeah, Bloomberg is loyal to Michael Bloomberg and the sort of status quo capitalist financial sector, right? I mean, that's kind of their space. They're kind of like an alternative CNBC, so to speak. And they do some other stuff and investigative journalism. I want to hear from the audience on this one, because I have a problem with what's going on the Bloomberg side. I have a problem pulling the press credentials. I just think it's a bigger problem than any one decision.
One more point I want to make that's a little bit related to this. The week that Michael Bloomberg announced that he was going to run for president, I saw an article written by Bloomberg talking about how the wealth tax is such a bad idea. And I stepped back and thought, wow, I mean, at any time that Bloomberg published this article, it would have been a problem, because that they're run by a billionaire, you know that they're this big media organization.
Right.
I mean, at any point, I would think there's a conflict of interest. But especially now, especially when Michael Bloomberg is running for president and two of his chief opponents, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, want to institute a wealth tax. And obviously, I can identify the bias there, and I know that whatever they're reporting on there is going to be skewed. about that topic, but I don't think the average person can tell that bias.
Maybe not. I mean, the name Bloomberg does make it a little bit easier to tell, but I agree that there is not necessarily the obvious connection as to policy. So I want to hear from you, and we'll maybe do a follow-up at the end of the week on this. Elon Musk of Tesla fame took the witness stand yesterday. This is the first day of his defamation trial. Now, if you don't remember what is going on here, I'll remind you. He is being sued by Vernon Unsworth, who's a British diver who was part of that rescue operation last year, which freed 12 boys and a soccer coach who were trapped inside a cave in Thailand. And Musk and this Unsworth diver clashed when that mission was going on. And Elon Musk called Unsworth a pedo guy on Twitter. Pedo guy suggesting that the guy is a pedophile, I guess because he wants to go and rescue boys or something like that. And then this led to a lawsuit against Elon Musk for defamation. Musk said, well, listen, I was set off because Unsworth went on CNN after the rescue, criticized me for trying to get involved, even though I was just trying to save the kids, so on and so forth. So this is a very bizarre case, Pat, because very often you see quite a few lawsuits in the defamation world. And then you see often settlements in a lot of those lawsuits that are filed. It's less common that they go to trial, and it's even less common that they go to trial, particularly with someone so prominent involved. So that's why this is extremely interesting. And then when they do go to trial, you often also don't see the primary person, particularly someone as notorious as Elon Musk, testify. So this is like an outlier of outliers.
Yeah, because typically defendants don't testify in their own trials. Maybe that's more for like high profile cases or for more serious crimes like murder or something like that. But yeah, it is an interesting move by Elon Musk, I think. Also, just the fact that they have to assemble a jury for something like this, it seems very crazy. Like I understand like maybe this guy who was called a pedo guy, he feels as if his integrity has been breached or attacked or whatever, and he wants to do right by it. So I guess it's something that the criminal justice system has to take a look at. But it all seems a little bit over the top to me. And a lot of the jurors had to get taken off of the case because either they had some sort of connection to SpaceX or Tesla, or they had like some particular thoughts about billionaires. We can kind of suspect what those might be. So yeah, a very interesting case, I think.
So there's a few different things here. I mean, one is, does Elon Musk calling the diver a pedo guy, does that really damage the diver in any serious way? Did anybody come away thinking, is Unsworth really a pedophile? That's one question, which is going to be part of this. Number two, was it negligent or malicious on the behalf of Elon Musk? Then you get to questions of, does anybody owe anybody money? In this particular case, it would be Elon Musk owing money to Unsworth. And if you imagine being Elon Musk, if you really think that this is a PR stunt trying to get money from you, I understand why you go to trial instead of settling, even if it's easier to just settle, give the guy 500,000 or $1 million or whatever and get him to go away. If you really believe that this is a bogus PR stunt lawsuit, I understand taking it all the way to court.
And interestingly enough, they first had to determine whether or not Unsworth was a public figure.
Right.
Because if he was a public figure, then it would probably have been thrown out, because I guess the defamation rules are different when you're dealing with public figures versus non-public figures. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, in this case, the judge ruled that Unsworth was not a public figure, and that's why the case moved forward. But that is interesting, though. Like if Elon Musk had called some famous person a pedo guy, that probably wouldn't have gone forward. That wouldn't have gone anywhere. But there's like different rules with this sort of thing.
Yeah, the public figure thing is interesting because someone can be not generally speaking a public figure, but because of some acute event, sort of like temporarily a public figure, which is sort of what you could argue with the cave rescue stuff. That is an interesting thing, and it is a big piece of a lot of these trials. We'll see how it continues. Elon Musk testifying yesterday, unsure if he testifies more today. Let's talk about gun safety regulations and the Supreme Court. For roughly the last 10 years, the Supreme Court has not really taken up any gun cases, at least ones that would impact precedent around gun ownership, gun safety, the Second Amendment, et cetera. Back in 2008, the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment to right to bear arms is an individual right. And then 2 years later, in 2010, the Supreme Court said that the right applies to state law, not just federal law. And since then, it's basically been silence from the Supreme Court. They've had opportunities to take up gun rights cases, but they have opted not to do so. But starting this week, they are taking up a case from New York City. And several gun owners and the NRA's New York chapter challenged rules for having a handgun at home. And they say that in New York City, much like in Boston, it is quite restrictive to have handguns. And they are arguing that the New York City law is so restrictive that it is unconstitutional, that it violates the right to bear arms at a fundamental level, because gun owners are forbidden from carrying their pistols anywhere other than 7 specific firing ranges within the city limits, which means that they can't bring them to a second home or to a shooting range or to other states nearby that might have more permissive gun laws. So this is an important case, Pat, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's been a long time since the Supreme Court said anything about gun rights. Number two, this is also the Trumpian Supreme Court. This is not only the first gun rights case in a while at the Supreme Court, it's also the first one since Donald Trump has selected 2 justices, and it could set the tone for potential challenges to many city and state level gun safety regulations all over the country. So a very important case.
And what's interesting is that this particular case may be moot now, but that doesn't mean that the broader implications of the ruling wouldn't have any effect. It may be moot because once it became clear that the Supreme Court was going to take up this appeal from the gun owners, the state and the city of New York decided to change their gun laws to now allow handguns to be transported and locked and unloaded at second homes or shooting ranges around outside the city. So now that New York has backed off of this gun law, it's kind of weird that it's still being taken forward to the Supreme Court. And now the lawyers representing New York have to still make the case that this initial ruling was okay and that they were allowed to do this, even though the city no longer stands behind it.
Yeah, and that is why, so the stakes are almost in a sense higher because depending on how this goes, the more guns in more places advocates may actually be emboldened to go further in cities and states challenging restrictions that already exist. So this is a very big deal, and it's not been getting that much attention. And I understand, it's constant Trump scandal fatigue. He's embarrassing himself at NATO in the UK, impeachment hearings. We've got a 2020 Democratic primary going on. Candidates are entering, candidates are dropping. I get it. But often I feel like the trend, Pat, is things related to courts have a big impact and are often underreported. The Supreme Court that we now have is going to be impacting American society for decades, and it doesn't get the attention that it should get. Donald Trump choosing federal judges will impact the judiciary for decades. This decision may impact gun rights regulations all over the country, not nearly getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah, people think that our rights stop and end at the Constitution, but really it's based on how the courts interpret the Constitution, right?
Yes.
So even the individual right to carry a gun, we always as a country thought that we had that, but it wasn't really set into stone until the DC versus Heller decision about 10 years ago. So yeah, people don't really understand the impact that the courts have, and Trump having those 2 Supreme Court picks in his first or second year of being president, that's huge. That's going to have huge implications generations down the road.
And it makes it extra frustrating when we remember that there were people in the lead up to the 2016 election saying, if it's not Bernie, it doesn't really matter who it is. If it's not this person or that person, it might as well be Trump. When you look at the judiciary, I'm trying to think out loud, Pat. I think the judiciary more than any other area is the one where even if it were Hillary, far to my right, we would have been much better off for a long time had it been Hillary over Trump.
Yeah, that's the thing. We forget that the presidency and the executive branch is just one of the co-equal 3 branches of government. And when we chose our president in 2016, we really weren't just choosing one branch of government, the executive. We were choosing 2 out of 3.
Yes.
Because we were also choosing who was going to have power at the Supreme Court. And I think that was very overlooked. And the chief argument I would think I was making back in 2016 for supporting Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, aside from Trump just being unqualified and unready for the job.
Aside from all of the completely obvious ones.
Aside from all the completely obvious ones that everyone discusses, the Supreme Court was kind of at the top of my list there.
No question about it. Let me know what you expect the Supreme Court to do in this case. If you have a thought, we will let you know ultimately what it decides. What's the schedule, Pat? Is it in January and June that they issue rulings?
I thought it was in May. But maybe it changes year to year. I don't know. There's always so much lead up, and then it seems like there's 2 weeks that they have in session where all the rulings are made.
Yeah, the same-sex marriage decision, I feel like, came in June or July 2015. In any case, we'll let you know when there is a decision from the Supreme Court on this. That does it for today. We will have a new show and a new bonus show tomorrow. Look forward to you joining us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.